Hey, guys, Speak Easy podcast audience. Now, I have not brought you a topic this intense for quite some time. So I need you to make sure that your volume is at the highest capacity that you can literally stand. And I need you sitting down so you can get every bit of what we're about to discuss. Yes, you read that right. You read it, and you probably read it twice before you press play. But I'm not even going to give you any juiciness beforehand. I'm just going to let us, when we dive into it, we're going to dive into it. With that being said, I'm excited about our guest who is on the show today. Hello, Frederick. How are you?
I am terrific. So good to be here.
Oh, my goodness. So this discussion is going to be one that's really different from what we've normally had on the episode, simply because your background is so diverse, but not just that, it's topics that are still pretty taboo in the world. So with that being said, before we jump in, let the studio audience know a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'll tell you how these stories came back. I was in Vietnam as a United States Marine. On my second day in country, when I asked the Marine ahead of me, "What's this stuff all over our boots?" And he said, "Don't worry about it. That just kills the plant life so we can see the people that are trying to kill us." And I took his word for it. We all did. And then a lot of years later, about 2 years ago, as I was recovering from my third operative procedure for exposure to Agent Orange, it occurred to me that I had done some things in my life that deserved a second look. And that came to me because an editor that had worked on some books 20 years earlier, books that came out, two of them in particular, one called Run to Hell, which we'll get to, the other story, The Boardwalkers, told two terrific tales that had been rated very highly. They had received a lot of critical acclaim, but they had disappeared because the little publisher that had put them out went belly up for reasons not connected to me. And they never got to a second printing after running through 20,000 books. And in fact, today you can find those stories in the first editions on sale at Amazon. First edition of the Boardwalkers is selling right now at about $930. A few remaining copies. If it's new, $199 to get a used one. So anyway, while I was recovering from my surgery for what Agent Orange seemed to do to me, the big hiccup that came along with that, I was told you ought to dust these things off. You ought to bring them up to speed, up to what's going on today, and tell those stories all over again. And when I did, and I know you interview authors, I found that the 20 years in between the first and second editions really gave me an opportunity to flesh things out. You approach it again with a certain maturity, a certain understanding you didn't possess and didn't know you didn't. At least that must be true for writers. Maybe it's true for other people as well. But in any event, the stories are out now. They've been very well received, very happy about that, have some great reviews. And I'm here to talk about them. Maybe we could start where I started in the practice of law, which was down in Atlantic City, if that works for you.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
All right, good.
You know, when it comes to, Speak Easy podcast listeners, one of the reasons why I said that today's episode was going to be really different is because of Frederick's background, because of being a Marine and being in law, and not just being in law, but the achievements that he's been able to, be able to reach. So when it comes to a run to hell, many of you throughout this year, that's probably been your thought process as we go further along. But I want to hear it from Frederick, what that really stands for.
All right, Run to Hell. We'll start there, and then we'll come back to the Boardwalkers. But Run to Hell tells the story of a mob lawyer from Philadelphia who has some problems in his life that send him in that direction, on that run to hell. He meets up with a very strong female character, much stronger than any of the male characters in the book. Lee Gunther meets Jamie Calaro, who is an FBI special agent who has her own troubled pasts. And I think the troubled pasts are a good place to start with a story. Lee was a guy who grew up in Philadelphia, represented figures in the Philadelphia mob family, as I did, and came to find out that there was a story behind the death of Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly was a Academy Award-winning actress in Hollywood who picked up the Best Actress Award in 1954 for The Country Girl, and then went off, gave up Hollywood after starring with Cary Grant and any number of older actors. She was about 20 years younger than most of her co-stars. And she was always deemed to be the girl next door with a sexual allure. A good stance for a Hollywood actress. But Grace was a real-to-life person, aside from being an Academy Award winner and a princess. And Grace met a tragic end. We all know about the tragic end, if you know anything at all about Grace Kelly. She died when she drove off the Moyenne Corniche, which is a highway in Monaco, when she was the Princess of Monaco. Now, I know something about this story because my dad grew up next door to Grace and was the same age. I know something about this story because my uncle was best friends with her 2-year younger brother, Jack Kelly, who was a city councilman in Philadelphia and president of the United States Olympic Committee at the time that he was murdered as well. Well, I also understand the story from friends that I came to know as I was practicing the criminal law in Philadelphia and in the state of New Jersey. I had a friend, Fat Joey A. Altamari, who brought me the story. Fat Joey A. was named that because he was Joey Altamari, and they couldn't call him Joey A. because at the time in the New York and Philadelphia crime families, there were 5 different Joey A's. So he became Fat Joey A. because he weighed about 450 pounds. And I can still remember Joey telling me after he was on his last federal prison stint, "Freddie, they tried to kill me. They made me walk all around this place." I said, "Joey, they tried to keep you alive. You're sitting in your cell. You're a fat slob. Come on." But Joey brought me the story also. I asked him, "Can I tell this story? Is this going to be a problem?" He said, "Freddie," this is how he talked, "Freddie, they're all dead now, all those guys. You can say anything you want." So I said whatever I wanted. I told the story. And that's Lee's backstory in A Run to Hell. He learns how Grace Kelly died and what 18 months later, because the guy was investigating it, her brother Jack Kelly, the city councilman in Philadelphia, who was also the president of the United States Olympic Committee, was murdered on the streets of Philadelphia, 12 blocks and 6 hours apart from her brother-in-law, who was also investigating the cause of death of Grace Kelly. Lee's knowledge of how that happened is what sends him on his run to hell. And he meets a girl who is absolutely terrific. I love this woman. Jamie Calero is an FBI agent who comes up through the ranks at a point in time when women really didn't break the glass ceiling with any regularity at the FBI. At that time in California, in the office that Jamie walked through as a starter, women were called agents if they had worked first as clerical agents in the Bureau and then went off to higher training. And worst, Jamie never liked the idea of being what they called all female agents, special agents. They called her a breastfed, and that's something that she doesn't put up with, she doesn't get along with, and she strives in this story to become a manager. And we see whether she gets that position. But she also has a backstory. The backstory, if you're from Central America, you know the story well. There was a hero down there, Dr. Hugo Spadafora, who died in a way that Central Americans still understand and still tremor when they hear about. There is a recording of what happened when Hugo died that's still maintained by the CIA. And this isn't real life. This isn't part of the story. This is what really happened. And he died at the hands of dictator and drug kingpin General Manuel Noriega, who worked as a partner with the Medellin drug cartel with Hugo Escobar. 1989 was a time when folks took a look at whether we should take an invasion of Panama to take out Manuel Noriega. And in this book, we learn about the joint FBI and CIA operation to take that guy down, hoping to avoid the invasion. In 1989, the invasion happens, and the United States Armed Forces becomes the largest posse in the world to take out this guy. But what happened before that is what is the story of A Run to Hell. It's a good one. I especially like it. I like it because I grew up with a mentor in the criminal law, a fellow by the name of Raymond J. Takeoff in Philadelphia, who left Philly to go down to do drug work, representing drug dealers and their associates in the South Florida area in the 1980s. Ray was one of the lawyers in real life who represented Manuel Noriega. And I got the inside story from Ray of what this guy was like, how he talked and what he did. And Ray is a guy who is remembered in the law, not only for representing big drug dealers, but he also was used as an informant for the FBI and the United States Department of Justice in the largest takedown of corrupt judges in the United States court system, both the federal courts and district courts, and also in the two districts for state prosecutions of folks in South Florida. Ray had some good insights. He passed them along, and it's a great tale. It's a good tale because there's backstories that do what I like to do. There are backstories that have where my characters have love interests, and that helps move things along in a nice way. It's a good story. That's a good story.
I love it. It stands out because for me, I am Philadelphia born and raised. So all of the names are like, my ears perk up. I'm like, this is true crime. This is Criminal Minds, CSI, all mixed.
I grew up in Germantown in Philadelphia. Those stories will come home.
They all come home. And it's interesting because we get to that point where we don't realize that a lot of the stuff that we see on television, there is a lot of stuff that's homegrown that is just as intense.
Well, you know something, the nice part of this is it touches upon other Philadelphians that people don't always think about. By the way, here's the big the copy of the book around that. But there are folks in there who are real that you wouldn't normally think of. Because you're from Philadelphia, you probably recall what Philadelphia media used to call the pronounced transgender female. They didn't call her that. They just called her the woman who was out there, Rachel Harlow, who owned her own nightclub. She didn't own the nightclub. She was the front for the nightclub down on Bank Street in Philadelphia. But Rachel came out in the 80s as one of the first transgendered females who was willing to admit that I'm a transgendered female. In fact, she was well known not only in the Philadelphia community, but David Bowie, who met her at the Cannes Film Festival, said he was a big influence on his life when he was part of that life. In fact, she's still living and cooking in Philadelphia. And you'll run into those kinds of folks if you're a local Philly person or beyond that. Rachel, of course, showed up on television regularly as a guest of Mike Douglas, which was a program syndicated by KYW out of Philadelphia. And she even admitted on television, I'm a transgender female. So I like that aspect of the story. I like the fact that she had no problems talking about her sexuality. And I had to, most of the characters in the story are dead, but there's a transgendered female who picks up on what Rachel Harlow may have said or may have done. But good story. Let's go to the boardwalkers. Can we do that?
Sure.
Excellent.
Before we get to the boardwalkers, I want to know, how did you transition when it came from military to law?
How had this happened? You came back from Vietnam in those days, which was for me. I came back in 1969, right before Christmas. Now, I went to the William Penn Charter School in Philadelphia, which points me out as being a Quaker. And those people were, of course, big on anti-war. They were big on being pacifists. But I got into that because my grandfather, who was a Quaker also, and I came from a long line of Philadelphia Quakers, had gone into the military during World War II. And my grandpa, Doc, he was a doctor, has the best war story I ever heard. So I'll share that with you. Grandpa Doc was a urologist who had learned to practice medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. And he had an ongoing practice, but when he saw everything that happened on December of 1941 at Pearl Harbor, he joined the Navy to be a healer. And my grandpa, Doc, has the best war story I ever heard. As a urologist, that was his profession. He one day had somebody walk into his office, which was a little strange. Actually, all doctors who went into the Navy or into the armed forces during the term of the World War II were turned into surgeons, general surgeons, to patch up wounds. If it bleeds, we fix it. That was basically their motto. But Grandpa Doc had somebody come into his office and say, "We have a special person we want you to treat. We want you to do it tomorrow." And Grandpa Doc said, "Yeah, I'll do that. What do I care? He has nothing else to do. He's in the middle of the Pacific on a hospital ship. What else is he going to do?" And the guy that came in for treatment was Bob Hope, and my grandpa cured him with a clap. And we got Christmas cards, or my grandpa Doc did, for about 15 years after the Second World War ended, thanking him for being a great doctor. It's my favorite war story, and I hear it all as a lifetime member of the VFW.
Best war story ever. Like that, there is no comparison to that ever.
let's go to, if we could, to a run to hell. I'm sorry, to the boardwalkers. Run to hell's a good story, but let's go to the boardwalkers.
From hell to the boardwalk, right?
Here we go. Yes, we're going to stroll on the boardwalk now. And you know the Jersey Shore. You're in Philly. We all know the Jersey Shore. In fact, I live at the Jersey Shore now. I don't go to Atlantic City anymore. I left Philadelphia, and I'm a little further north these days of the Jersey Shore. But I lived for about 15 years in Atlantic City and practiced there, which was a good place for me to be. And during that period of time, I represented more sex workers in Atlantic City than any other lawyer, which meant I defended more prostitutes than any other lawyer in the world during that period of time. This was during the 80s. And it came to me that there was a great story that could be told out of that, a story that turned into a murder mystery and also dealt with the crime families and folks involved in crime down in Atlantic City. That turned into a thriller and murder mystery because the protagonist, the lead character in the story, Paul Cameron, is accused of murdering his wife in a very atrocious way. He's a lawyer who cannot give an alibi and is ultimately charged with the crime. Now, that's the story that comes home in a lot of ways. And frankly, with these second editions, it's come up with some terrific reviews. I mean, I'm really happy. And to a certain extent, even surprised, but really great. It's really great. And it's a murder mystery that folks might enjoy. They will enjoy it.
I was gonna say, no, they'll enjoy it. They'll enjoy it. But it hits on some very interesting topics because for whatever the reason, that still, when we think about streetwalkers, when we think about when we think about crime, and even though it's not in the news as much as it used to be, right? Because at one given time, you can literally pick up a newspaper and it'll say crime boss saved something in the neighborhood, or I mean, you could hear any number of stories, good or bad.
Let me ask you this. How do you think a lawyer gets a reputation that brings people in the door? If you're a criminal lawyer, they come in the door because no one goes to jail. And that was my reputation in Atlantic City. If you came to Freddie, you didn't go to jail. And the stories, the folks that walked in the doors were represented by business managers who were very happy with the way things were going. And at the time, and I changed my perspective on this some years later. I couldn't do this after a certain point. But at the time I was so good at this, I realized I have the ability to refer cases to other lawyers in other jurisdictions, because the people who were coming to Atlantic City to practice their profession had a rotation. They would stay in Atlantic City until it got too hot. That meant the vice cops knew them on case, on site, and they'd get arrested. And in Atlantic City, like a lot of places, you didn't have to do what you had to do to get arrested for prostitution in almost every jurisdiction. You have to offer sex for a price to someone. Sex without a price is no crime. It's a good time. But sex with a price is a crime. And vice cops would very often not tell the truth about this. But I found ways that I could handle my cases. And I had clients who worked the circuit. They worked Atlantic City until it got too hot. And that meant for the ladies and gentlemen who practice this profession that the vice cops knew them on site and they had to get out of town. So they would go to Vegas until the same thing happened. And then they would go to Honolulu until the same thing happened. And while they were in Honolulu, it occurred to me, I got a little sister who practices law. Why don't I refer her cases? I don't even want a referral fee. I want to just see this thing work out for my baby sister. And I can recall getting a call one day from one of my clients from Honolulu who said, "Oh, Mr. Schofield, we can't go to your sister anymore. She's trying to cure us all." And as I listened to that, I was thinking, I think you're right. Maybe there is something not right about this. And actually, my initial thought was, don't you want to see your nieces and nephews go to college? This is how we're doing this thing. But as I thought about that, it brought about a change in life. I actually walked out of what was kind of a lucrative career.
Oh wow, that's an interesting story to see how something like that would shift it. And because again, every situation is going to be different. So, but yeah.
We all grow in different ways.
And I never knew, even though we hear about them transitioning from state to state or from place to place, I knew of them transitioning from state to state, but not to Honolulu.
Yeah, it was like there was a tour. It was a well-regimented thing that they did. And again, I had that practice because no one ever went to jail and saw Freddie. And in New Jersey, where I represented folks, there were even mandatory jail sentences after the third conviction. I never had anybody do it today. I don't know. You can't be proud of that, can you? But it's something that turns into a great mystery, a great
story
thriller, and the stories that you'll find in there. Paul Cameron is the lawyer in the story. I tried all the cases that Paul Cameron tried, and they come out the way Paul Cameron faces them.
Oh, wow. I love it. I love it. Oh, my goodness. Speakeasy Podcast listeners, I like I said, I told you this was going to be a great episode. I hope you listened. I hope you had it at high capacity to hear. And if you missed something, go back. Yes, go back and listen to it again. Make sure that you share it out because someone else may be just as intrigued by the stories in these books as you are. So let them know how they can reach out to you personally, if they want to reach out to you personally, or how they can get the books.
Okay, here I have props. Here we go. Frederick Schofield. It's on Amazon, but frederickschofield.com. That's the best place to go to get started with the books, to catch the reviews and to catch the stories behind the stories. And you'll find them at Amazon. Frederick Schofield, look me up there. I'll be glad to see you. And you can contact me through either the publisher's website, the website maintained by the PR guy, or through my own website. I'm on Facebook. I just like to talk to everybody.
I love it. And you guys know, Speakeasy podcast listeners, you know, we appreciate you. I listen, you guys are avid readers. You're people that are saying that, you know, I want to write a book, but I don't know what to write about. If you didn't get inspired by this episode, I'm quite sure that you need to check your pulse. There is something a little deeper going on, and we need to fix that, kind of fix that up. But with that being said, I appreciate each and every one of you, because without the Speakeasy podcast listeners, there is no Speakeasy podcast show. So make sure that you tune in, join the conversation, and again, don't forget, leave us a review and share it out. With that being said, this was another episode of the Speakeasy podcast with your host, Altavise Pelzer. And until next time, don't forget to press it out. See ya.